The locket hanging from Flora Harper's neck caught a fleeting ray of morning sunlight as she swept the dusty porch of the Oakridge General Store, sending a brief golden flash across the weathered boards. It was April 1876, and the small town of Oakridge, Colorado Territory was slowly coming to life as the harsh winter finally released its grip. Flora, 22 years old with auburn hair tucked neatly beneath a simple bonnet, paused to adjust the silver locket that had hung around her neck for the past 5 years, never opened, not once. "Morning, Miss Harper," called Mrs. Peterson as she made her way down the street. "Fine day, isn't it?" Flora nodded politely, her fingers instinctively wrapping around the locket before returning to her sweeping. The store wouldn't open for another hour, but there was always work to be done, especially since her uncle had fallen ill last winter. The responsibility of running the family business had fallen squarely on her shoulders, and Flora bore it with quiet determination. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the main street. A group of riders was approaching, trail dust coating their clothes and horses. Travelers weren't uncommon in Oakridge. The town sat along one of the main routes west, but these men didn't have the look of simple travelers. Flora recognized the lead rider immediately. Sheriff Donovan had ridden out yesterday to meet with the stagecoach that was 2 days overdue. Behind him rode 3 men she didn't recognize. 2 looked to be typical cowboys, trail-worn and weary. But the third, Flora's breath caught slightly. The third sat tall in his saddle, his dark hat pulled low over his eyes, a leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and a presence that seemed to command attention without effort. "Miss Harper," Sheriff Donovan called, tipping his hat as the group came to a stop in front of the general store. "These gentlemen need supplies. I told them yours was the finest establishment in town." Flora smiled. "The only establishment in town, you mean?" The sheriff laughed. "Well, that too. This here's Vincent McCall and his men. They're bringing a herd north from Texas, stopping here to rest and resupply before heading on to Wyoming territory." The tall cowboy Vincent McCall dismounted with a fluid grace that betrayed years in the saddle. He approached the porch, removing his hat to reveal dark hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. "Madam," he said with a slight nod, his voice deep and tinged with a southern drawl, "might we trouble you for some supplies?" "The store opens at 8, Flora replied, suddenly very aware of the dust on her apron and the stray hairs that had escaped her bonnet. "But I suppose I could open early for travelers in need." Vincent McCall's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners as he smiled. "Much obliged, madam." As Flora turned to unlock the door, she felt his gaze lingering on her, or, rather, on the silver locket that caught the morning sun once more. Inside the store, Flora moved efficiently behind the counter, gathering the supplies the cowboys requested: coffee, flour, sugar, bacon, ammunition, tobacco, all the essentials for men on the trail. Vincent McCall stood examining a shelf of canned goods, while his 2 companions, introduced as Hank and Joe, argued good-naturedly about whether to splurge on some hard candy. "That's quite a locket you're wearing," Vincent said casually, as he approached the counter with his selections. Flora's hand went to the silver pendant automatically. "Yes, it's just a keepsake." "Family heirloom?" he asked, those blue eyes studying her with unexpected intensity. "Something like that," Flora replied, unwilling to elaborate further. "Your total comes to $4.75, Mr. McCall." He counted out the money, his fingers calloused but clean. "Vincent, please. Or Vince, if you prefer." "Mr. McCall will do just fine," Flora said, though she couldn't help but notice how his smile deepened at her formality. "We'll be in town for a few days," he said, gathering his purchases. "Herd needs rest, and so do the men. Might I call on you again, Miss Harper?" Flora hesitated. It had been a long time since any man had shown interest in her, and with good reason. The entire town knew her story, or thought they did. The locket around her neck was as much a warning as it was a memento. "For supplies, of course," she answered carefully. Vincent McCall settled his hat back on his head. "Of course. For supplies." As the cowboys left, Flora found herself standing at the window, watching as Vincent McCall mounted his horse with easy grace. There was something about him, something in those thoughtful blue eyes that unsettled her. It had been 5 years since she'd allowed herself to feel anything for a man. 5 years since she'd sealed her heart away, much like whatever was hidden inside the locket she never opened. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of customers and tasks. By mid-afternoon, Flora had nearly forgotten about Vincent McCall and his penetrating gaze until the bell above the door jingled and he walked in alone. "Back already, Mr. McCall?" Flora asked, looking up from the ledger where she'd been tallying the day's sales. "Forgot something important," he said, approaching the counter. "Soap. Can't stand trail dust much longer." Flora smiled despite herself. "That I can provide." She turned to the shelf behind her and selected a bar of yellow soap wrapped in brown paper. "I also wanted to apologize," Vincent said as she placed the soap on the counter. "Apologize? Whatever for?" "For being forward about your locket. I can see it's something personal." Flora's fingers went to the silver pendant. "It's all right. People often ask about it." "And you never tell them what's inside?" Her eyes met his, suddenly wary. "How do you know I never open it?" Vincent shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. "Just a guess. The way you touch it like it contains something precious but painful." Flora felt exposed, as if this stranger had somehow glimpsed a truth she'd kept hidden for years. "You're very observant, Mr. McCall. Comes with the territory. When you spend most of your time with cattle and the same few men for company, you learn to notice the details when something or someone interesting comes along." There was a warmth in his voice that Flora found herself responding to, despite her better judgment. "And is that what I am, Mr. McCall? Interesting?" "More than interesting, Miss Harper." He paid for the soap, his fingers brushing against hers for the briefest moment. "Much more than that." As the days passed, Vincent McCall became a regular visitor to the general store. Sometimes he came with legitimate needs: tobacco, a new shirt, writing paper to send a letter east. Other times, his excuses grew increasingly transparent, until one afternoon he simply arrived with no pretense at all, just as Flora was preparing to close for the day. "Mr. McCall," she said, unsurprised to see him, "what can I help you with today?" "Thought I might walk you home," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "If that wouldn't be too forward." Flora hesitated. In the 5 days since Vincent McCall had ridden into Oakridge, she'd found herself thinking of him far too often. His easy manner, his respectful distance, the way his eyes seemed to see past her carefully constructed barriers, it was all dangerously appealing. "People would talk," she said finally. Vincent shrugged. "People always talk, especially in small towns. You don't understand. In Oakridge, I'm..." She trailed off, unsure how to explain her complicated position in the town's social hierarchy. "You're a woman who works hard and deserves an evening walk with pleasant company," Vincent finished for her. "Nothing more complicated than that." Flora found herself smiling. "When you put it that way, Mr. McCall, it sounds quite reasonable." She finished closing up the store, and they walked together down Oakridge's main street as the setting sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Vincent kept a respectful distance between them, his hands clasped behind his back as he told her about the cattle drive from Texas, the characters among his crew, and his plans to establish his own ranch someday. "Wyoming has good grazing land," he explained. "Once I deliver this herd and collect my pay, I might have enough to make a down payment on a small spread near the Medicine Bow Range." "That sounds like quite a dream," Flora replied, genuinely interested. "Have you always wanted to be a rancher?" Vincent nodded. "My father had a small place in Kentucky before the war. Lost it all when I was 14. Been working cattle ever since, saving every penny." "The war took much from many," Flora said quietly, her hand unconsciously rising to the locket around her neck. Vincent noticed the gesture, but didn't comment on it. Instead, he asked, "Have you always lived in Oakridge?" "No, I came to live with my uncle after my parents died in '65, typhoid fever." The familiar pains surfaced, dulled by time, but never truly gone. "Uncle Henry was my father's brother. He took me in when I had nowhere else to go." "And now you run his store for him?" Flora nodded. "He had a stroke last winter, can't speak properly anymore, and his right side is weak. He lives with me in the cottage behind the store." They had reached the small, neat cottage by now. Light shone from the windows, and smoke curled from the chimney. "Mrs. Landry comes to sit with him while I'm at the store," Flora explained. "She'll have made supper for us." Vincent removed his hat. Then I won't keep you from it. Thank you for the pleasure of your company, Miss Harper. Flora, she said impulsively. You can call me Flora. His smile was warm in the gathering twilight. Flora, he repeated, as if testing the name. Good night, Flora. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night. Vincent? She watched him walk away, tall and straight-backed in the fading light, before turning to enter the cottage. Inside, Mrs. Landry was just setting the table, while Uncle Henry sat in his chair by the fire, a plaid blanket over his knees despite the mild evening. There you are, dear, Mrs. Landry said. I was beginning to wonder. I walked home with Mr. McCall, Flora explained, hanging her shawl on a peg by the door. Mrs. Landry's eyebrows rose. The Texas cattleman? Well, now that's interesting. It was just a walk, Mrs. Landry. The older woman smiled knowingly. Of course, dear, just a walk. She gathered her things to leave. Stew's hot on the stove, and I baked fresh bread this afternoon. Henry ate well tonight. After Mrs. Landry left, Flora served 2 bowls of stew and sat beside her uncle at the small table. Uncle Henry couldn't manage words well anymore, but his eyes were as sharp and knowing as ever. He gestured toward the window with his good hand, then pointed at Flora with a questioning look. Yes, that was Vincent McCall walking me home, she admitted. He's just passing through with a cattle drive. Uncle Henry grunted, his gaze dropping meaningfully to the locket at Flora's throat. I know, Uncle, I know. She touched the silver pendant. I haven't forgotten. That night, after Uncle Henry had been settled into bed, Flora sat by the dying fire, the locket open in her palm for the first time in 5 years. The small daguerreotype inside showed a young man in a Union Army uniform, his face serious, but his eyes kind. Thomas Elliott, her fiancé, dead at Gettysburg before they could marry. Before she could tell him, she was carrying his child, the child she lost 3 months later, in a hemorrhage of blood and grief that nearly took her life as well. Flora snapped the locket shut and returned it to its place around her neck, never to be opened again, or so she had promised herself 5 years ago, a promise she had just broken. The next morning, as Flora was arranging a new shipment of yard goods on the store's shelves, the bell above the door jingled. She turned, expecting Vincent, but instead found Sheriff Donovan entering, his expression grim. Morning, Flora, he said, removing his hat. Got some troubling news. Thought you should hear it from me. Flora's heart quickened. What is it? That McCall fellow, the one who's been calling on you. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. He's not what he seems. What do you mean? Got a wire from Denver last night. There's a man matching his description wanted for questioning in connection with the stagecoach robbery near Pueblo last month. 2 men killed. Flora's hands gripped the edge of the counter. There must be some mistake. Vincent Mr. McCall, he's a cattle drover. He has men working for him, a herd headed to Wyoming. Sheriff Donovan shook his head. That's just it, Flora. I rode out to their camp early this morning. The men were there, and the cattle, but McCall was gone. Lit out sometime during the night, according to his foreman. Didn't say where he was going, just left money for the men's wages and instructions to continue to Wyoming without him. Flora felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. I don't believe it. There must be some explanation. Maybe, the sheriff conceded, but until I know what it is, I wanted to warn you to be careful. If he shows up again, you come get me right away. You hear? After the sheriff left, Flora moved through the day in a daze. She helped customers, ordered supplies, dusted shelves, all while her mind worked furiously to reconcile the charming, thoughtful man she'd begun to care for with the outlaw the sheriff described. It simply didn't fit. Vincent McCall's eyes had been honest, his manner forthright. How could she have been so wrong about him? As dusk fell, Flora closed the store and walked home alone, the weight of disappointment heavy on her shoulders. She was nearly to the cottage when a shadow detached itself from the large oak tree in her yard. Flora! She gasped, recognizing Vincent's voice immediately. Stay away from me, she warned, taking a step back. The sheriff is looking for you. Vincent moved forward into the fading light, his hands raised in a placating gesture. I know. That's why I'm here to explain before I go. Explain what? That you're a thief? A murderer? Pain flashed across his face. No, I've never killed anyone, Flora. And I'm not a thief either, at least. Not the way they're claiming. Despite her better judgment, Flora found herself wanting to hear him out. Then what are you? Can we talk somewhere private? Please. Flora hesitated, then nodded toward the small garden shed at the edge of the property. There. But I warn you, if you try anything, I would never hurt you, Vincent said with such sincerity that Flora almost believed him. Inside the shed, with only a sliver of dying daylight filtering through the single small window, Vincent removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. I used to work for the Rocky Mountain Detective Association, he began. For 3 years, I helped track down outlaws, recover stolen property, protect stagecoaches. I was good at it. Flora crossed her arms. And now? Now I'm trying to clear my name. Vincent's blue eyes were earnest in the dim light. The stagecoach robbery they're looking for me for? I was there, but not as a robber. I was working undercover, trying to infiltrate the Mason gang. Something went wrong. The gang figured out I wasn't one of them. And when the shooting started, I got caught in the middle. If you're innocent, why not go to the sheriff and explain? Vincent gave a bitter laugh. Because the new superintendent of the Detective Association thinks I turned. There was a large shipment of gold on that stage, and most of it disappeared during the chaos. He's convinced I took it. Did you? No, Vincent said firmly. But I can't prove that. And without proof, my word means nothing. So I've been tracking the real thieves, trying to recover the gold and clear my name. Flora studied his face, wanting desperately to believe him. And the cattle drive? Your men? That part's real. I've been working as a trail boss for the past year, keeping my head down while I try to find the gold and the real thieves. The men with me don't know anything about my past. They just think I'm a cattleman with wanderlust. Why did you leave them? Why run if you're innocent? Vincent stepped closer, his expression intense. Because I got word that one of the Mason gang was spotted in Denver. I need to find him, Flora. He might be my only chance to prove my innocence. Flora's hand went to her locket, an unconscious gesture of uncertainty. Vincent noticed, his gaze softening. I know I'm asking a lot, asking you to believe me when all the evidence says you shouldn't. But I swear to you, I'm not the man they say I am. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and the weight of trust betrayed, or perhaps merely tested. Why tell me all this? Flora finally asked. Why not just disappear? Vincent's answer was simple. Because in the short time I've known you, I've come to care for you, more than I should, more than is wise, given my circumstances. Flora felt her resolve weakening. There was something in his eyes, a sincerity, a vulnerability that resonated with her own guarded heart. I can't stay, Vincent continued. It's not safe for you if I do, but I couldn't leave without telling you the truth. Before Flora could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Through the small window, they could see Sheriff Donovan and 2 deputies approaching the cottage, lanterns in hand. They must have followed me, Vincent whispered. I have to go. Wait. Flora made a split-second decision, one that went against all logic but felt undeniably right. There's a loose board in the back wall. You can slip out that way. Head for the creek bed. It's dry this time of year, and you can follow it out of town without being seen. Vincent looked at her with gratitude, and something more, something that made her heart flutter despite the danger. Thank you, Flora. I don't know if I believe you, she admitted, but I don't believe you're a killer either. He nodded, understanding the tenuous trust she was offering. I'll prove I'm telling the truth, somehow. Vincent moved to the back wall, finding and lifting the loose board Flora had mentioned. Before slipping through, he turned back to her. That locket you wear, whatever's inside that you can't bear to look at it, doesn't define who you are. Remember that. And then he was gone, disappearing into the gathering darkness as Sheriff Donovan's knock sounded at the cottage door. The weeks that followed were difficult for Flora. Sheriff Donovan questioned her extensively about Vincent, clearly suspicious of her claim that she hadn't seen him since the day before he disappeared. The townspeople whispered behind her back, some pitying, others judgmental. Poor Flora Harper, they said. First Thomas, now this outlaw. The girl has terrible taste in men. Through it all, Flora maintained her daily routine. Opening the store, caring for Uncle Henry, attending Sunday services, and pretending that her brief connection with Vincent McCall had meant nothing. But at night, alone in her room, she found herself wondering where he was, whether he was safe, and if there had been any truth to his claims of innocence. May turned to June, and the summer heat settled over Oakridge like a woolen blanket. One particularly stifling afternoon, as Flora was fanning herself behind the counter, the bell above the door jingled to announce a customer. She looked up to see a well-dressed gentleman she didn't recognize, unusual in a town as small as Oakridge. "Good afternoon," she greeted him. "Can I help you find something?" The man removed his hat, revealing prematurely gray hair, despite a face that couldn't be much past 35. "I hope so, miss. I'm looking for information about a man who might have passed through here, name of Vincent McCall." Flora's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "The sheriff might be better able to help you with that, mister." Pinkerton, James Pinkerton of the Pinkerton Detective Agency." He produced a badge from his vest pocket. "And you are?" "Flora Harper. I run this store for my uncle." Pinkerton nodded, his shrewd eyes taking in every detail of the store and of Flora herself, lingering momentarily on the silver locket at her throat. "Miss Harper, I understand from the telegraph operator that a man matching McCall's description spent several days in Oakridge about a month ago. I'm told he was quite attentive to you during that time." Flora busied herself rearranging a display of canned goods. "Mr. McCall was a customer, yes. He and his men needed supplies for their cattle drive." "Was that all he was? Just a customer?" She turned to face him directly. "Mr. Pinkerton, I'm not sure what you're implying, but my relationship with Mr. McCall was perfectly proper. Now, is there something specific you're looking for, or are you just here to gossip?" Pinkerton's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "I apologize if I've offended you, Miss Harper. I'm investigating a stagecoach robbery. Several witnesses placed Vincent McCall at the scene, and I'm trying to track his movements since then. As I said, he was here briefly with a cattle drive bound for Wyoming. He left suddenly, and I haven't seen him since. That's all I know." Pinkerton studied her for a long moment, as if weighing the truth of her words. "Did McCall ever mention the Rocky Mountain Detective Association to you?" Flora kept her expression carefully blank. "No. Why would he?" "Because he used to work for them." Pinkerton placed his hat back on his head. "Thank you for your time, Miss Harper. If you happen to hear from Mr. McCall, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know. I'm staying at the hotel." After he left, Flora sank onto the stool behind the counter, her knees suddenly weak. At least part of Vincent's story had been confirmed. He really had worked for a detective agency. But that didn't prove his innocence in the robbery, and now there was a Pinkerton detective looking for him, which couldn't be good. That evening, as Flora was preparing supper, a knock came at the cottage door. She opened it to find Mrs. Landry, her expression troubled. "Evening, Flora. Sorry to disturb you, but a boy just brought this by my place." She handed Flora a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Said a man gave him a dime to deliver it to you, but he got confused about which house was yours." Flora thanked Mrs. Landry and closed the door, examining the package with trepidation. It was small and light, with no marking on the outside. With trembling fingers, she unwrapped it to reveal a folded piece of paper and a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. The note was brief. "What's inside doesn't define who we are, but sometimes it helps us remember who we were. V." Inside the handkerchief was a small brass key, tarnished with age. Flora stared at the key, turning it over in her palm, wondering what it meant. A key to what? And why had Vincent sent it to her? She tucked both the key and the note into her apron pocket, determined to puzzle it out later when Uncle Henry was asleep. That night, by the light of a single candle, Flora examined the key more closely. It was old, the brass worn smooth in places, with an ornate bow and a simple bit. Not a door key, she thought, but perhaps for a chest or a box. Or her heart quickened a locket. With shaking hands, she removed the silver locket from around her neck. She had never attempted to open it with anything but the clasp, which had been stuck shut since the day she closed it on Thomas's image and her grief. But on closer inspection, there was a tiny keyhole, almost invisible along the seam. Flora inserted the brass key. It fit perfectly. She hesitated, then turned it slowly, hearing a faint click as the mechanism released. The locket opened easily, revealing the familiar daguerreotype of Thomas on one side, but it was the other side that made Flora gasp. Where once there had been nothing, now there was a tiny scrap of paper, carefully folded to fit the small space. She removed it with trembling fingers and unfolded it to reveal a message written in a neat, precise hand. The Mason gang will hit the Denver-bound stage near Cottonwood Creek on June 15th. Gold shipment from Colorado Springs. Vincent McCall, RMDA. Flora's mind raced. This was proof that Vincent had been working undercover, that he had tried to warn someone about the robbery. But how had he gotten this note into her locket? And why? The answer came in a flash of understanding. The locket had never been stuck. She had simply been unwilling to open it, to face the memories it contained. Vincent had somehow recognized this, had seen the parallel between her locked locket and her locked heart, and had sent her the key to both. June 15th. That was tomorrow. If the Pinkerton detective saw this note, he would know Vincent had been telling the truth about working undercover. But would he believe that Vincent hadn't taken the gold himself? And more importantly, would Vincent be safe if Flora revealed what she knew? Morning found Flora at the hotel, requesting to speak with Mr. Pinkerton. She was shown to a small private dining room where the detective was having breakfast. "Miss Harper," he said, rising to greet her. "This is unexpected." Flora wasted no time on pleasantries. "I need to know what happened to the gold from the stagecoach robbery." Pinkerton's eyebrows rose. "I beg your pardon? The robbery near Pueblo, the one you're investigating. What happened to the gold that was stolen?" The detective studied her for a long moment before responding. "Most of it is still missing. Why do you ask?" Flora reached into her pocket and withdrew the locket and the brass key. "Because I believe Vincent McCall is innocent, and I think I can help prove it." She explained about the key and the hidden note, showing both to Pinkerton, who examined them with growing interest. "This is McCall's handwriting," he confirmed, studying the note. "And the date matches when the robbery occurred, but this doesn't prove he didn't take the gold himself after the shooting started." "No, it doesn't," Flora agreed, "but it does prove he was working undercover, just as he claimed." Pinkerton leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Harper, when was the last time you saw Vincent McCall?" Flora hesitated, then decided on honesty. "The night he left town. He came to say goodbye and to tell me his side of the story. And you believed him." "I wanted to," she admitted, "but I wasn't sure, not until now." Pinkerton sighed. "McCall was a good detective, one of the best by all accounts. But good men can go bad, Miss Harper. Or they can be falsely accused," she countered. "You said the gold is still missing. If Vincent had stolen it, wouldn't he have disappeared completely? Gone to Mexico or somewhere he couldn't be found? Instead, he's been working openly as a cattle drover, using his real name." The detective nodded slowly. "A fair point. And now he's sent you this key, and note why." Flora touched the locket, which she had returned to its place around her neck. I think he wants to clear his name, and maybe he thought I could help. Or maybe he's using your obvious affection for him to throw us off his trail." Flora felt her cheeks warm, but held Pinkerton's gaze steadily. If that were the case, why provide evidence that he was involved with the robbery at all? "No, Mr. Pinkerton. I believe Vincent is innocent, and I believe the real thieves are planning another robbery tomorrow near Cottonwood Creek." Pinkerton's expression sharpened. "What makes you say that?" "It's just a feeling," Flora lied, unwilling to reveal that she had received more than just the key from Vincent. "But if I were investigating, that's where I'd be tomorrow." After leaving the hotel, Flora returned to the store, her mind made up. She had done what she could to help Vincent clear his name. Now she needed to help him more directly. That evening, she informed Mrs. Landry that she needed to visit a sick friend in Colorado Springs and would be gone for a few days. It was the first time she had left Uncle Henry's side for more than a few hours since his stroke, and the guilt was almost overwhelming, but Flora was determined. Before dawn the next morning, she was on the eastbound stage, a small carpet bag on the seat beside her, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had no real plan beyond reaching Cottonwood Creek before nightfall when, according to the note Vincent had sent her separately, the Mason gang would make their move against the Denver-bound stage. The journey was long and uncomfortable, the stagecoach bouncing over rutted roads and the other passengers a middle-aged couple and a traveling salesman making only sporadic conversation. By late afternoon, as the coach approached the way station at Cottonwood Creek, Flora's nerves were drawn tight as fiddle strings. The way station was little more than a wooden building with attached stables, a water trough, and a small corral. As Flora stepped down from the coach, stretching her cramped muscles, she scanned the area, unsure what or who she was looking for. "Miss, you staying here?" the stage driver called down. "Yes," Flora replied. "Just overnight. I'm meeting someone." The driver shrugged and began unloading the luggage, while the station manager, a grizzled man with a pronounced limp, showed the passengers to the simple accommodations inside. "Supper's at 6, he informed them. "Nothing fancy, but it's hot and there's plenty of it." Flora was given a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out on the empty road stretching west toward Denver. She washed her face and hands, then sat on the edge of the bed, wondering what to do next. If Vincent's information was correct, the Denver-bound stage would arrive soon, and the Mason gang would attempt to rob it after it left the station. But where was Vincent? Had he expected her to bring help, or had he simply wanted to clear his name with the authorities? As the shadows lengthened outside, Flora made her decision. She couldn't sit idly by. She needed to at least warn the station manager about the potential robbery. She found him in the small dining area, setting out plates for the evening meal. "Excuse me, Mr. Jenkins," he supplied. "Sam Jenkins?" "Mr. Jenkins, I have reason to believe the stage from Colorado Springs might be in danger. There could be an attempted robbery after it leaves here tonight." Jenkins straightened, his expression skeptical. "And how would you know something like that, miss?" Flora hesitated. I can't say exactly. But please, you must warn the driver when he arrives." "No offense, miss, but stagecoach schedules ain't public knowledge. How do you even know there's a coach coming through tonight?" "Please, just trust me," Flora urged. "Lives could be at stake." Jenkins studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. "I'll mention it to the driver when he arrives, but don't go spreading rumors among the other passengers. Last thing we need is a panic." It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Flora retreated to her room, her anxiety mounting with each passing minute. Through her window, she could see the western horizon turning crimson as the sun began to set. If the stagecoach didn't arrive soon, it would be traveling in the darkness-perfect conditions for an ambush. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart leap. Looking out, she saw a lone rider approaching at a gallop, dust billowing behind him. As he drew closer, Flora's breath caught. Even at a distance, she recognized Vincent McCall's straight-backed posture and broad shoulders. Without thinking, Flora rushed outside, reaching the front of the station just as Vincent reined in his lathered horse. "Vincent!" He dismounted quickly, his expression registering surprise and then alarm at the sight of her. "Flora, what are you doing here?" "I got your messages, both of them. I showed the note from my Locket to a Pinkerton detective who's looking for you." Vincent grasped her shoulders. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. The Mason gang?" "I know. That's why I came. I couldn't just sit at home knowing you were in danger." The intensity in his blue eyes softened momentarily. "You're either the bravest or the most foolish woman I've ever met." "Probably both," Flora admitted. Vincent's lips twitched in a brief smile before his expression turned serious again. "Listen carefully. The Denver stage will be here within the hour. The Mason gang plans to hit it about 2 miles west of here, where the road dips into a ravine. I need to warn the driver and the guard. I already tried to warn the station manager, but he didn't seem to believe me. Jenkins, he's a good man, but cautious. I'll talk to him." Vincent glanced toward the setting sun. "We don't have much time." Together, they hurried inside, where Jenkins was now serving supper to the other passengers. "Sam," Vincent called, striding toward him. "We need to talk, now." Jenkins looked up, recognition dawning on his weathered face. "McCall? Thought you were up Wyoming way by now." "Change of plans? Is there somewhere private we can speak?" Jenkins nodded toward a door at the back of the room. "My office." Once inside the small, cluttered space, Vincent wasted no time. The Denver stage is in danger. The Mason gang plans to rob it tonight, about 2 miles west of here. Jenkins' skepticism was evident. And how would you know that? Word is you're running from the law yourself, McCall. It's complicated, but I'm trying to clear my name. I used to work for the Rocky Mountain Detective Association. I was undercover with the Mason gang when the Pueblo robbery went bad. They think I double-crossed them and took the gold, but I didn't. Then who did? Vincent's expression hardened. Clay Mason himself. He shot his own men and took the gold, then disappeared. But now he's back, and he's planning another hit tonight. Jenkins rubbed his jaw, considering. The Denver stage is carrying a payroll for the mining company in Silver Plume. Not many folks know that. Mason would know, Vincent said grimly. He has connections everywhere. What do you need from me? Just delay the stage. Give me time to get the local law here. Jenkins shook his head. Sheriff's out of town until tomorrow. Deputy's just a kid, barely knows which end of a gun to hold. Vincent cursed under his breath. Then I need you to warn the driver and guard when they arrive. Tell them to be ready. And what will you be doing? I'm going to try to get ahead of Mason and his men. If I can catch them setting up their ambush, I might be able to stop this before it starts. Flora, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. I'm coming with you. Both men turned to her in surprise. Absolutely not, Vincent said firmly. You can't stop me, Flora replied, equally determined. You need someone to back you up, and I can ride. It's too dangerous. So, is letting you face a gang of outlaws alone. Vincent looked to Jenkins for support, but the station manager just shrugged. She seems set on it, McCall, and she ain't wrong about you needing backup. Vincent ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Flora, please, I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. The genuine concern in his voice nearly weakened her resolve, but Flora stood her ground. And I couldn't bear to stay here wondering if you're lying dead somewhere because you had no one to watch your back. Their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills, neither willing to yield. Finally, Vincent sighed in defeat. Fine, but you stay back when we find them. Promise me. Flora nodded, relief flooding through her. I promise. Jenkins agreed to lend Flora a horse, and within minutes they were riding west along the stage road, the last rays of sunlight fading behind the mountains. Vincent set a brisk pace, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain ahead. The ravine is about a mile further, he said over his shoulder. That's where they'll set up. They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the creak of saddle leather. As they approached the ravine, Vincent signaled for Flora to stop. We'll leave the horses here and proceed on foot, he whispered, dismounting and tying his horse to a scrub oak. Stay low and quiet. Flora followed his example, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it must be audible in the gathering dusk. They crept forward through the brush until the road came into view below, winding down into the shallow ravine before rising again on the far side. There, Vincent breathed, pointing to a cluster of boulders on the far slope. 3 men, and there's another by that dead tree. Flora squinted, barely able to make out the shadowy figures in the fading light. How do you know it's them? The one by the tree is Clay Mason. I'd know him anywhere. Vincent reached into his boot and extracted a small derringer, which he handed to Flora. Take this. Use it only if you have to. I'm going to work my way around behind them. What's your plan? Create a diversion. Make them think the law is on to them. With luck, they'll scatter before the stage even gets here. And if they don't? Vincent's expression was grim in the dim light. Then I'll have to take more direct action. Before Flora could protest, he was gone, melting into the shadows with a skill that spoke of his years as a detective. She clutched the derringer, its weight unfamiliar and frightening in her hand, and waited. The minutes stretched endlessly. The light continued to fade, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. In the distance, Flora heard the faint rumble of what might be an approaching stagecoach. Suddenly, a shot rang out, followed by shouts of confusion from the ravine below. More shots followed, coming from different directions. Though Flora was certain only Vincent was firing, he was moving between positions, creating the illusion of multiple lawmen closing in. The strategy seemed to be working. Through the gathering darkness, Flora could see the outlaws scrambling for cover, looking wildly about for their unseen attackers. Then a voice called out, deep and commanding. "Give it up, Mason! We've got you surrounded." Vincent, Flora realized, was attempting to draw out the leader. It was a dangerous gamble. If Mason realized the deception, Vincent would be severely outgunned. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then a figure detached itself from the shadows near the dead tree, a rifle raised. "McCall!" the man called. "Is that you, you son of a bitch? Come out and face me like a man." "It's over, Mason," Vincent's voice replied from somewhere to Flora's left. "The gold from Pueblo, where is it?" Mason laughed, a harsh sound that carried clearly in the night air. "You still don't get it, do you? There never was any gold. It was all a setup to get rid of you. You were getting too close to our real operation." "What operation?" "Wouldn't you like to know?" "Come out, McCall, and maybe I'll tell you before I put a bullet between your eyes." The distant rumble was growing louder. The stagecoach was approaching. Flora realized with horror that despite Vincent's efforts, the ambush was still very much in progress. The other outlaws had regrouped and were taking positions along the road. Without thinking, Flora raised the Derringer and fired a shot into the air. "Look out!" she shouted at the top of her lungs. "Ambush! Turn back!" Her cry echoed through the ravine, followed immediately by a furious oath from Mason. "Get her!" he commanded, and one of his men started up the slope toward Flora's position. Vincent broke cover then, firing at Mason even as he ran toward Flora. "Run!" he shouted to her. "Back to the horses!" Flora turned to flee, but her foot caught on a root, sending her sprawling to the ground. The Derringer flew from her hand, disappearing into the underbrush. As she struggled to rise, rough hands grabbed her, yanking her to her feet. "Well, well," drawled a voice in her ear. "What have we here?" The outlaw who had caught her dragged her down the slope toward Mason, who was now taking cover behind a large boulder as Vincent's bullet struck sparks from the stone. "McCall!" Mason called. "I've got your woman. Show yourself or she dies." The shooting stopped abruptly. For a heart-stopping moment, Flora thought Vincent might have been hit. Then his voice came from the darkness, steady and controlled. "Let her go, Mason. She has nothing to do with this. Come out where I can see you, hands empty, and maybe I will." Flora struggled against her captor's grip. "Don't do it, Vincent." "He'll kill you." The outlaw cuffed her roughly. "Shut up!" In the distance, the stagecoach had stopped, warned by Flora's cry and the sound of gunfire. Flora could only hope the driver had turned back toward the station to get help. "I'm coming out," Vincent called. "Don't hurt her." "No!" Flora cried, but it was too late. Vincent emerged from the shadows, his hands raised, his gun presumably left behind. Mason stepped out from behind the boulder, his rifle aimed squarely at Vincent's chest. "Always were too soft for this business, McCall. A pretty face, and you lose all sense." "Let her go," Vincent repeated. "Then you and I can settle this." Mason laughed. "I don't think so. I think I'll kill you both, rob that stage, and be halfway to Mexico before anyone even knows what happened." Flora's mind raced desperately. She needed a distraction, something to give Vincent a chance. Her hand went to her throat, to the locket that hung there, the locket that had become a symbol of her inability to move forward, to live fully. With a quick motion, she tore the locket from her neck, chain and all, and flung it directly at Mason's face. The small silver pendant caught him by surprise, striking his forehead just above his eye. It was only a momentary distraction, but it was enough. Vincent lunged forward, tackling Mason to the ground as the rifle discharged harmlessly into the air. Flora's captor loosened his grip in surprise, and she wrenched free, spinning to drive her elbow hard into his midsection. He doubled over with a grunt of pain. Vincent and Mason were grappling for control of the rifle, rolling in the dirt as the other outlaws closed in. Flora looked frantically for a weapon, finding only a fist-sized rock, which she hurled at the nearest outlaw with surprising accuracy. It struck him in the shoulder, making him curse and stumble. The sound of approaching riders made everyone freeze. Torches bobbed in the darkness, and a voice called out, "This is the law! Drop your weapons!" It was Jenkins, Flora realized with a surge of hope, along with what appeared to be several armed men, probably passengers from the stagecoach and the station. The outlaws, seeing they were outnumbered, began to surrender, all except Mason, who was still locked in a desperate struggle with Vincent. With a sudden twist, Mason broke free, the rifle still in his hands. He swung it toward Vincent, his finger on the trigger. "No!" Flora screamed, launching herself forward without thinking. The rifle discharged with a deafening roar. Flora felt something burn across her upper arm, and then she was falling, landing hard on the rocky ground. Pain blossomed, sharp and hot, and she heard Vincent cry out her name as if from a great distance. Then he was beside her, his face a mask of anguish in the flickering torchlight. "Flora! God, no! Where are you hit?" "My arm," she managed through gritted teeth. "Just my arm." "Mason. Jenkins and the others have him. Don't try to move." Vincent tore a strip from his shirt and bound it tightly around her arm. The bullet had only grazed her, but the wound was bleeding freely. "Why did you do that?" he demanded, his voice rough with emotion. "He could have killed you." Flora reached up with her good hand to touch his face. "He was going to kill you. I couldn't let that happen." Vincent caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. "Stubborn, foolish woman." "You've called me that before," she reminded him, managing a weak smile despite the pain. Jenkins approached, carrying a torch. "Stage driver's gone for the doctor," he said. "How bad is she hurt?" "Bullet grazed her arm," Vincent replied. "She'll need stitches, but she'll be all right." He glanced up. "Mason?" "Secured, along with the rest of his gang. And look what we found in his saddlebags." Jenkins held up a small canvas bag that clinked heavily. "Gold dust and coins. I'm guessing this is what's left of the Pueblo robbery." Vincent nodded grimly. "That should help clear my name. Did you send someone for the sheriff?" "He'll be here by morning. In the meantime, let's get the lady back to the station where she can be comfortable." Vincent gathered Flora carefully in his arms, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. "Hold on," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you." As he carried her up the slope toward where they had left the horses, Flora's gaze fell on something glinting in the torchlight, her silver locket lying open on the ground where it had fallen after striking Mason. The images inside were visible, Thomas on one side, the now empty space where Vincent's note had been on the other. "My locket," she said weakly. Vincent paused, following her gaze. "Leave it," he said gently. "Some things are meant to be left behind." Flora looked up at his face, strong and determined in the flickering light, and knew he was right. The locket had served its purpose, both as a shield against further pain and, ultimately, as a weapon in their moment of need. But she didn't need it anymore. "Yes," she agreed, "it's time to let the sun in." 3 days later, Flora sat on the small porch of the way station, her arm properly bandaged by the local doctor, watching as Vincent spoke with James Pinkerton and the county sheriff. The Pinkerton detective had arrived the previous day, alerted by telegraph to the capture of Clay Mason and the recovery of at least part of the stolen gold. The conversation appeared intense but not hostile. Occasionally, Vincent would gesture emphatically or shake his head, while Pinkerton took notes in a small book. Finally, the three men shook hands, and Vincent turned toward Flora, a smile breaking across his face. "Good news?" she asked as he climbed the steps to join her. "The best." Vincent sat beside her on the bench, taking her uninjured hand in his. "Pinkerton has officially cleared me of any wrongdoing in the Pueblo robbery. Mason confessed to everything, killing his own men, taking the gold, even framing me." "That's wonderful," Flora squeezed his hand. "So, you're free to go wherever you want now?" A shadow crossed Vincent's face. "Not exactly. Pinkerton offered me a job working for his agency. Said they could use a man with my experience." "Oh." Flora tried to hide her disappointment. A Pinkerton detective would be constantly on the move, traveling wherever cases took him. "That's a fine opportunity." Vincent studied her face. "I turned him down." "You did? But why?" "Because there's somewhere else I need to be." He shifted to face her directly. "Flora, these past few days seeing you wounded, knowing it was because of me, it made me realize something. I've spent years chasing outlaws, living on the move, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. But none of it means anything without someone to come home to." Flora's heart beat faster. "What are you saying, Vincent?" "I'm saying I love you, Flora Harper. I have since the moment I saw you sweeping that porch in Oakridge, wearing a locket you never opened because the pain inside was too great to face." He took both her hands in his, mindful of her injured arm. "I'm saying I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears welled in Flora's eyes. But what about Wyoming? Your ranch? It's still there, waiting. The cattle drive I was leading, my foreman will see it through. And with the reward money for capturing Mason and recovering the gold, I'll have enough for a good start. His blue eyes searched hers. But I don't want to go unless you're with me. You want me to go to Wyoming? Flora's mind whirled with the implications. But my uncle, the store? We could sell the store, use the money to make your uncle comfortable. Or, if you want to stay in Oakridge, I'll find a way to make that work too. Vincent's grip tightened. I just know I don't want to be without you any longer. Flora thought of the life she had built in Oakridge, safe, predictable, bounded by grief and duty. And then she thought of what a life with Vincent might be, like challenging perhaps, but full of love and possibility. You don't have to answer now, Vincent said, misinterpreting her silence. I know it's sudden. Flora shook her head, a smile blooming through her tears. It's not too sudden. Not when it feels this right. She leaned forward, pressing her lips gently to his. Yes, Vincent McCall. I'll go to Wyoming with you. I'll go anywhere with you. The kiss he returned was tender at first, then deepening with a promise of all that lay ahead for them. When they finally parted, breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I don't have a ring yet, he murmured, but I promise you'll have one before we leave for Wyoming. Flora laughed softly. I don't need a ring, I just need you. You have me, Vincent assured her, drawing her carefully into his arms. For all the days to come. 2 months later, Flora stood on the porch of a small cabin nestled in the foothills of Wyoming's Medicine Bow Range, watching as Vincent worked with a young horse in the corral nearby. The air was crisp with early autumn, the aspens beginning to turn gold against the deep green of the pines. The ranch was modest, just the cabin, a barn, a corral, and 100 acres of good grazing land with a clear creek running through it. But it was theirs, purchased with the reward money and the proceeds from selling the Oakridge store. Uncle Henry was with them, his condition slowly improving in the mountain air, his speech returning bit by bit. Flora touched the simple gold band on her left hand, still new enough to feel strange against her skin. They had married in a small ceremony in Oakridge before setting out for Wyoming, Mrs. Landry weeping happily and Sheriff Donovan giving the bride away. The journey had been long but full of promise, each mile taking them further from the past and closer to the future they would build together. Vincent looked up from his work, catching her eye across the yard. He smiled that warm, genuine smile that had first captured her heart and raised a hand in greeting. Flora waved back, her heart full. There were challenges ahead, she knew. Building a ranch from scratch would not be easy. Winter would come, harsh and demanding. There would be setbacks and disappointments, along with triumphs and joys. But for the first time in years, Flora faced the future without fear. The locket that had hung around her neck for so long, containing her grief and regrets, was gone, left behind in the dust of a ravine where she had discovered her own courage and the love that would sustain her. Vincent had been right that night. It had been time to let the sun, and time to open her heart to light and life and love again. And standing there in the clear Wyoming sunshine, watching as her husband approached with that look of adoration that still took her breath away, Flora Harper McCall knew she had made the right choice. The sun was in, and it would never go out again.